Okay, the phone lines are open, and you're next with our guest, Bill Morgan, on Coast to Coast AM. Bill, if you had the ability to pop into a time machine and go back into time, where would you go and what would you want to see? What would you want to witness?
Do I have to stay there or can I come back?
You can come back.
Okay, I love being alive right now. Wow. Kind of like to hang out with Robert E. Lee. I'm a Civil War buff.
You wouldn't go all the way back to the moment of creation?
Well, I never thought about that, but history is probably my biggest passion. I'd like to hang out with Bull Halsey. Actually, it is Bill Halsey, too. But it'd be, of course, fascinating to go back to the moment of creation, sure.
So what time period would you go back to?
I'd watch Adam and Eve get tempted, I guess.
So I was trying to get you to give me a year.
Oh, okay. I have a paper here that I'll send to people for free if they want. This is one nice thing. Is one of my strengths, perhaps, is I worked construction, and by golly, I don't think just because you have a degree you're smart. If you don't, you do
I
not.
agree. Hey, you know what? You know what intelligence is? Being street smart.
Yes, intelligence
Let me tell you.
is not a function of education always.
Nope.
It could be. But a buddy of mine who hangs signs for a living got out a calculator and a Bible, looked up some verses, and added up to, pretty much like what Usher did. And if somebody wants it, just go to my website, Fish Don't Walk. I'll send it to you. And let's see. We're looking at about 6,192 years. And, of course, there's tons of
Can't get you to go back to that million-year period or back there, huh?
Oh, no, the sun would have cooked us by now. We'd be a cookie floating through space by now, I think. The sun's been beating on us that long.
Let's take some calls. You ready?
Sure.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air with us. Where are you calling from?
Las Vegas.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, catfish walk. We got walking catfish in Florida. They closed down Homestead Air Force Base. Next, the Earth isn't at the center of the universe. My father worked on the Saturn V, put men on the moon. This is the work of man, not any divine miracle. There's no reason for anyone to need a god, but men seem to need gods and invent them all the time.
So what are you saying?
Wow, I loved everything you said. First off, there is a walking catfish, and there's also the northern snakehead that's called the walking fish. And there's the mud skipper that's called the walking fish, but guess what they don't do? They don't walk. They crawl. Walking is where you have a limb supporting your vertebrae. None of these fish walk. They're crawling. And it's a very different skeletal structure. And the caller does not have to believe me. He can look it up on the Internet and evolution websites. I've done it. They admit that they're crawling animals. They're not walking. And there's a big difference.
But there's a lot of intermediate forms which you've totally ignored, especially among whales. They have more whale intermediate forms. If you just study the fossil record, there's been many published papers about it. I've been a scientist all my life, and you can't be a paleontologist unless you understand evolution.
Well, I disagree. I've studied the whales a little bit, too, myself.
What'd you find?
Well, if I mispronounce them, let me know. The mesenchide is a hoofed animal, size of a hyena. This is one of the whale ancestors, George, and its teeth resemble some whale. No other anatomical part of it resembles a whale.
Anatomical,
right. The ambulocetus, very fragmentary.
Good. That's a good one. I'm glad
pelvis.
You know that one.
Right.
Okay, and then the chicken and the egg, the egg came first. It doesn't require a chicken to lay it. There's lots of things that lay eggs. You need a chicken-like animal that had a mutation in the egg would produce a chicken.
Well, you need two eggs, wouldn't you agree?
Huh?
You would need two eggs. You need a male and a female.
A male and a female egg?
Well, you need a male and a female after the egg hatches.
Well, there are some species that can breed with other species, but the fertility, unless they're closely related, doesn't work. And by the way, the DNA of a human being is a lot closer to a chimpanzee than that of a gorilla. We're just we're just animals, just like other animals. There's nothing scientifically to distinguish us. If you got a soul, bring it into the lab. We'd all like to see it.
Okay. Well, you brought a lot of stuff up. But do you agree that it's possible the fish that you brought up is crawling and not walking?
You got to crawl before you can walk. Evolutionary. evidence is that most beings prefer to fly, I believe, among the insect population.
Right.
And according to science, by the way, science always changes. When we are in error, which humans make errors all the time, we revise our theories. But your creationism is always perfect, and you're never wrong. And by the way, your beliefs are based on stolen Jewish documents. I'm a Jew, and I resent the fact that most creationists are Christians. It's not even their religion or God, and they've appropriated it all and now profess to tell us what to believe, and even convert us because we're not perfect or saved, and we don't even need salvation.
Okay, well, I never brought any of the salvation up. You did, and
right.
Well, at least you did admit that it could be possible. Well, I think you did admit they're crawling and not walking, so that's good. Never did I say the Earth is the center of the universe.
But you did say you were threatened, and Galileo...
Threatened?
Before, yeah, by your biology teacher and by people that you debated with.
Well, no, not his
threatened.
No,
okay,
by
okay,
the teacher at the school you meant.
Oh, I was physically threatened by a biology teacher at high school. I'm 47 years old. I'm not in high school anymore.
Me neither, but the thing is, Galileo was threatened with a lot more than you were, and a man named Bruno during the Middle Ages, who postulated there could be life on other planets, he got burned by creationists. Now, I think that's more of a threat than a harsh word here and there.
Okay, what we have to do is get away from the emotion and look for what's true. Now, you have 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body, sir. Do you think that's the result of design or chance?
Well, go ahead. No questions.
Why not?
Because he's on hold.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, go ahead.
But should I ask my question?
Well, you can't answer you.
Oh, he's gone?
He either hung up or what. But...
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, and the Saturn V rocket was built where I work at Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station, and that's a design. He brought up the Saturn V rocket. It's a beautiful design.
Sure.
And the DNA similarities, can I touch on that? George?
Billy, you can answer and respond any way you want.
Okay, I want to defer to you. It's your show. He said human DNA is most similar to ape than anyone else, and I would answer, of course. DNA makes proteins. I have more in common with an ape than I do an insect. I eat bananas. I have hair. I have 4 limbs. I have lungs. I would expect the similar amount, a lot of similarities in the proteins. But when you're talking 2%, we have 2.4 billion base pairs in the human DNA. You're talking about 140 million differences, and that's quite a bit. And what's fun about genetics is humans have 30,000 genes, and typically they say genes make proteins, which is true, but we have 300,000 proteins. So the genes do not just make one protein. And I hope I'm not losing everybody, but just because we are perhaps 1.5% similar to apes, first off, I would predict that. By no means does that data mean that we're related to them. The differences are overwhelmingly different.
All right, next up, Wild Card Line. You're on the air with us on Coast to Coast. Hi.
This is Jean calling from Northfield, Ohio.
Hey, Jean, thanks for calling.
Years and years ago when people first started talking about having like an out-of-body experience, but or a near-death experience, and they would talk about seeing the light and everything. I don't know if this is urban legend or not, but I remember hearing that some kid's father went through that, and they asked him, did you see the light and did you see angels and everything? And he said no, he saw aliens and that Earth was an experiment. And I was wondering what the guest thinks about that.
Okay, well, I think when you die, you can have a lot of things going on, including lack of oxygen to the brain.
But what do you think about the possibility of Earth being an experiment controlled by another planet?
I don't believe that. I simply don't believe that. I believe you're either dead or you're alive. You might be near death. But I believe, the other guy talked about a soul, and it might have to do with this lady's question, too, if you talk about death. I wouldn't mind touching on the soul. Do you mind, Gene, if I talk about that for about 1 minute? First, George or Gene, or everyone listening to the show,
go ahead, yeah.
Wiggle your eyes. Just wiggle your eyes to the left and the right and up and down, okay? Okay. Now, what initiated that movement? It was a mechanical movement of your eyes through muscles, nerves, and little trochlea you have in your eye. But the initiation of that was a thought. You said, you know how I'm going to move my eyes, you moved your eyes. You can lift your arm based upon thought. A non-physical thought is what initiated you to move. To me, that's a soul. And I heard a quote that I like, and it's not, and this would shock Christians and believers at first, is you don't have a soul. You are a soul. You have a body. Your body is different from the day you were a fertilized egg till the day you die. Your body is changing constantly. But the soul is the part of you that decided to move your eyes, decides to love or hate, to kiss your wife or cook dinner or clean up the dishes. Your soul is the real Gene and the real George Noory, and our body is just a temporary thing, and our body is going to be dead a lot longer than it is alive. So that's why it's an important issue to look at, like what is the truth, not what is the religious bias, what is the truth? Do we have a soul?
Do you believe in reincarnation, Bill?
No, I do not. I believe once the soul leaves your body, it does not come back. There is a biblical verse for that in the book of Hebrews.
Next up, east of the Rockies, you're on the air with us. Hello there.
Hello, George. Hello, Bill.
Hi.
Hello.
This is Glenn calling from Texas.
Yeah, Glenn, go ahead.
Say, Bill, two quick questions. Do you know where the chicken comes from?
The first chicken?
Well, we know where giraffes come from. I was just wondering if you know where chickens come from.
The first chicken or the chickens we see today?
Yeah, the chickens we see today.
From roosters and hens.
Okay. Second question is, you would concede that we're sitting on tectonic plates on the Earth?
Absolutely.
Okay. How about the old cliche, the continents are, what is it, an inch a year drift?
That's what I've read, perhaps even less.
And you would concede that Africa and South America mesh together?
Absolutely.
You run that back, and how many, what is that, 150, 75 million years?
Great point, Glenn. That's a very, very good point. And respectfully, can I ask a question, and I'll try to answer yours, okay?
Yes, of course.
Suppose you're in Texas, and you and I are hanging out, and a car drives by at 60 miles per hour. And I say, hey, Glenn, that car was in Seattle 2 weeks ago. What would you say?
Well, I just have a problem with, God lining that up just to play a joke on us.
Okay, well, do you want to answer, or do you want me to just...
Well, okay.
You'd say, how do you know that?
Yes, but the chicken comes from the wild chicken.
Oh, okay.
Still there in large numbers in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Just wanted to let you know that.
Cool. Well, regarding the tectonic plates, if I saw a car going 60 miles per hour to the east, I couldn't say it was in California 2 weeks ago. All I can do scientifically is know that at this moment, at this time, it's going this direction at this speed. Plate tectonics is the same thing. We can measure it's moving a quarter of an inch today. It doesn't mean it was moving a quarter inch 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, or 157 million years ago. All we know is what it's doing now. Science deals in the present. Anything else in the past has hypothesis. Here's my belief, and you can disagree. The longest mountain range in the world is under the water. It's under the Atlantic Ocean. It's the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. If you look at the geography, it's like a zipper all the way from the north to the south. And it's got active volcanoes. So whatever caused that ridge, I think, happened fairly recently because it's got active volcanic activity still in it to this day. My hypothesis, and I wasn't there either, is that in the past we had a sudden split of the continents, and we get what we see today. Now we get, like, they talk about the skim on the top of the pudding. It's wiggling a little bit, perhaps. But I believe we had a catastrophic separation in the past, and that the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is evidence of that.
And that would explain the early whale bones in the Himalayas.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up geology. Good friend of mine said, come on, do you believe the Himalayas were underwater at one time? And I said, absolutely. But they weren't because there's seashells on top of the Himalayas, the Grand Tetons in Yellowstone, and everybody should go to Yellowstone. I hope you've gone there, George.
Well, I've scattered through it, but you better get there before the caldera goes. Let me tell you.
Well, there's no place like it in the world. The Grand Tetons are huge mountains at Yellowstone, and on top of the mountains is a different colored rock, sedimentary rock, which means rock deposited by water. All the mountain ranges in the earth have some kind of evidence that they were underwater at one time. Now, a person would say, well, the mountains weren't as high in the past. And I say, I agree 100%. The mountains weren't as high, but they were underwater at one time. And the Bible even discusses this in Psalm 104, that the mountains were lower at the time of the flood. But by some mechanism, the Himalayas were underwater in the past at one time. And I believe after the flood, the mountains rose and the valley sank.
Bill, would you agree that it's very possible we may never, ever get to the correct answer? It's based on, as you said earlier, your faith and other people's faith, but we may really never know.
We'll never get to 100% knowledge because there's faith involved in anything that happened in the past.
Do you wish that most schools would balance their teachings of evolution with creation?
I wish the schools in the science class would teach science. I wish they would teach hypotheses, observation, and what different people conclude. I might get people mad, but I don't think they should teach the Bible or Jesus or salvation or Genesis in the science classroom. I would be happy if they brought up the data, states that many geniuses in science believe that this is the result of design. Many geniuses do not believe that humans have bacteria ancestors. They don't believe 60,000 miles of blood vessels happened by chance. And then say, but a lot of people do. And they say, students, if you think there's a designer, on your own, you can try to figure out who it is. You can think it's the God of the Bible. You can think it's the Force, Fred Flintstone. But they can leave it just that a lot of people believe there's a designer. And as we talked earlier, the first law of thermodynamics supports that. The second law of thermodynamics, biogenesis, piles of evidence support a designer, and that should be taught in the science classroom.
Do you believe the designer gets involved in our day-to-day lives or simply just backs off? Because if he gets involved, why do we have so much hatred on this planet?
Because of free choice. A cow can be a little bit bad or a little bit good. A dog can be more good or more bad. A human can be incredibly bad or incredibly good. There's degrees of freedom, in my opinion, because I think most people do a lot of great things, and the bad is what makes the news headlines and causes a lot of suffering.
Well, the old saying, news is the bad. It's the tragic. It's the breaking story.
Yeah, they want to sell and make news, and it's a shame you don't hear about breakthroughs in cancer research as much, but that wouldn't sell newspapers. Paris Hilton sells newspapers.
Very rarely have you heard a positive story as a lead on any newscast.
Yeah, and there's such heroes in these hospitals and researchers, and everybody likes Kobe instead of the cancer researchers.
I agree with you. All right, Bill, stay with us. We're going to come right back. We're going to take final phone calls with you, and then next hour, because of our floating format tonight, where Bill started earlier, I will have open lines with you. Give you an opportunity just to sound off tonight. And don't forget, we will have a live program on July 4th as well. In just a few moments, I'll tell you who those guests will be, because they will celebrate the holiday with you. I'm George Noory. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, we'll have open lines next hour, and we'll be back in just a moment with more of your questions for our guest, Bill Morgan. Our program tomorrow, yes, live on the 4th of July, two guests, George Noory and a fellow by the name of Cliff, no last name. I have no idea why we don't have his last name, but he will not give it. But we're going to talk about their web bot technology, which looks into the future. So that's pretty fascinating stuff. So we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. I've got to believe, Bill, you believe in the devil, right?
Yes.
Well, I do too. I think there's evil out there like crazy. Let's take some final calls. They're going to go by quickly. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Bill Morgan on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, George and Bill.
Hey.
This is David. I'm calling from Yakima, Washington.
Okay, David.
I'd just like to point out the fact that The Genesis 7-day story of creation does not state that the earth cannot be millions or even billions of years old. First, if you look at the Hebrew text, you'll note that it does not say on the first day, but rather on day 1. Day 2, day 3, so on and so forth. The only time in Hebrew you put the article after the noun is when speaking in a figurative sense. So each day could rather be just a phase in creation, could be millions, billions of years, who knows. Secondly, the amount of time it takes for a day, 24 hours, is the amount of time it takes for the sun to rise and set. And according to the Genesis account of creation, the sun was not created until the 4th day. I'd just like to take the rest of it off the air, I guess.
Oh, no, stay on. It's up to George, though.
No, go ahead. As long as you don't hang up, go ahead.
Sir, what do you think of the Ten Commandments? What's your opinion of the Ten Commandments?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because, within the Ten Commandments themselves, there's a contradiction. You have God saying, "You shall not worship any graven image, for I am a jealous God." Yet if you go down the list and you look, it says, "Thou shalt not covet." So here we have God admittedly coveting a false god of your creation, yet you're not allowed to covet your neighbor.
Okay, do you think the Ten Commandments are true?
I think that there's some good morals within them, but I don't think the Bible is true, no.
Okay, the people who believe that the days in Genesis were long periods of time instead of short 24-hour type days have a problem with the 4th commandment, Exodus 20, verse 9 through 11. I'll summarize. It says, "Work 6 days and rest on one, for God created everything, the heavens, the earth, and the sea, in 6 days, and rested on the 7th. Now, he brought up the Hebrew, which is a great point. The Hebrews always believe those days to be a 24-hour day. Now, he talked about day 1. It's day 1, and then it's 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day. Then it says evening and morning. After each day, it says evening and morning. David, would you agree with that?
I don't know about all of that, but how do you get around the fact that the sun was not created until the 4th day?
Right. A day is a period of time, but there was light on day 1. The sun was created on day 4. But to get back to my question, each day has an evening and morning. It's very, very important that the evening was mentioned before the morning. And the reason for that is a Hebrew day. The Hebrews knew Hebrew better than me. I'm not picking on you at all. They knew Hebrew better than David. And for thousands of years, they always taught it was a literal 24-hour day. Now, the days are divided into time frames. You can have a 24-hour type period without the sun. Today, we have the sun. But on day 1, there was a source of light, and it was separated by the darkness. And the whole purpose of the week, the 7-day week that we have to this very day, is from the Ten Commandments, the 4th commandment that says work 6 and rest 1. So, and that's what the Hebrews have always believed. It's okay to defer to them when it comes to a Hebrew question.
Bill, so you're taking the literal sense, I guess, in terms of time chronology.
Well, because of the context of the writings, I take it to be literal. I know a lot of people say Genesis 1 is not literal. To me, it's the most literal chapter in the Bible because it quotes God 10 times. And I always tell people, don't believe me. David, don't believe me, but read it. It quotes God 10 times. It says, and God said, and God said.
Next up, first-time caller line. You're on with Bill Morgan. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
We are well, thank you.
Good. It's nice to hear from you, Bill. I just want to bring up 2 things here. One, you said before that we come from bacteria. Well, in evolution, we don't come from bacteria. We come from cells. And there's a big difference there. There are 3 types of cells in this on this planet. There's eukaryotes, there's non-eukaryotes, and then there's the archaea. Now, I don't understand why you took that poll because it's a fallacy in itself. If we come from bacteria, it makes no sense. We came from cells. We are made up of cells. Every cell in our body is made up of cells. We share the same eukaryotic cells between animals as well. I just wanted to just say that and get a comment off you about that. But I also want to say, I want to just talk about the endosymbiotic theory. Do you know what that is, Bill?
Yes, I do.
Okay. It's the idea that, well, it's not, it's actually what happens. You have an organelle in your cells. It's called mitochondria.
Right.
And mitochondria produces ATP. Now, mitochondria is bacteria, and it is in your cells. and you live with it. And, you know, I tell me this is kind of weird, but, I mean, to support that and what you're saying, we don't come from bacteria. You're absolutely right. We come from cells, and that's what evolution says. So one question, and I was putting a comment to that. You can go ahead and hit a comment with that, but here's my question. How do you, and you, by the way, I just want to say you gave an awesome explanation of how science is done through observation. I think that is exactly what it is. But using that, how do you empirically, now I'm saying empirically, how do you give the empirical data to actually prove or disprove creationism and intelligent design?
Great. A lot of good questions. Now, first, I've read quite a bit, and I might have read wrong stuff or forgotten it, but what I've read is people say, well, we didn't come from bacteria that's on the earth today. We call it archaebacteria. And that's...
that's archaea. That's
archaea, okay. Archaebacteria. But
we didn't come from archaea. There's three different types of... I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but we didn't come from archaea. That's a misnomer. We have relations to archaea, but we don't come from them. And that still goes into evolution. I'm sorry, sir. I'm a little nervous. I've never been on the radio before, too, so I'm kind of shaky as I'm talking.
You're doing great.
All right.
Okay. Well, I've run into people who just said, no, you're simplifying by saying bacteria, but you would say a single-cell organism without a nucleus that reproduces by binary fission, okay? Would we agree with that?
Yes, that's bacteria.
Okay, right. But the first ancestor, the oldest ancestor of you would say, is a single-cell organism doing binary fission to reproduce without a nucleus, correct?
No, we use mitosis. It's a different type of division. Those are two different types of division that you're talking about. Binary fission is totally different from mitosis.
Okay, but apples and oranges, isn't it? Right. Because we're still talking about whether one is created and plopped down here in whole, or whether it evolves from organisms, be it bacteria, cells, who knows?
Right. Single cell, we'll just say single cell. What I've read has been that. I didn't pull that out of the air, and I understand you disagree with me, but you believe we have single cell ancestors.
Go ahead, Bill.
Correct?
Go ahead.
And you asked about empirical evidence for creation. Well, first, sometimes people say creationists don't make predictions. Well, I'll make predictions. You won't get matter from nothing. You won't get energy from nothing. You won't get life from non-life. Every flamingo tomorrow that gives birth will give birth to a flamingo. Every flea is going to give birth to a flea. There's a lot of predictions there, and that's what I believe.
However, we've always been told the divine creator came from nothing. Always was, always will be, is what I was taught.
Well, I was taught, eternal. I understand the Bible to teach God created matter, so he's not made of matter. God created energy, he's not made of energy. If he created time, he is outside of time. And I'd like to make a quick point. That blows me away. But imagine we're two goldfish, George, in an aquarium, and you say, boy, are we lucky. And I said, what do you mean lucky? You say, we're lucky to be in water. We're lucky to have a filter in the corner. And we're lucky food falls on our head twice a day. I could say, I don't think it's luck. I think there's someone taking care of us outside this aquarium. Mm-hmm. And you could say, prove it. Where did he come from? Why do we get fed only once a day? I want to be fed 4 times a day. I want a bigger tank. I'm saying I'm limited to what I can know about that. A goldfish can't understand motocross. We can't understand an eternal God.
We may never understand.
Right. We're humble.
Wild Card Line, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hey, George. How you doing?
Good.
This is Eric. I'm calling from Tracy, California.
Okay, thanks.
Big shout-out to all my other fellow truckers out there and stream linkers and night hawkers.
Absolutely.
I'd like to kind of touch on something. Art Bell interviewed Dr. Michio Kaku, and they discussed the possibility of a cosmic lottery, that we may have won the cosmic lottery. And it made sense to me when the professor said that he was told by his second-grade teacher that God loved the world so much that he put the earth just right closest to the sun. And I was wondering if your guest, Bill, can touch on that and tell us what he thinks
absolutely.
about that, and also what his thoughts are on string theory. And I also have something of importance that I'd like to get out to your listeners.
All right, I love it. Okay, we're going to put him on hold. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to talk about a lottery real quickly. Sometimes, people think humans are the result of chance over time. And once at a high school, a very smart kid asked me, do you believe it's statistically impossible for an eye to have happened by chance? And my answer was absolutely yes. And he said, why? And I said, because I believe it's statistically impossible for one protein to happen by chance. If a protein can't happen by chance, an eye can't happen by chance, and an organism like a human can't happen by chance. And I'll go through this as simply as I can. Imagine an alphabet with 20 letters. Imagine I pick a word 400 letters long, and I say, guess my word. Your odds are 10 to the 520th power of getting that by chance. Okay, proteins are made up of amino acids, and it's in my comic book. I won't waste too much time on it. But the odds of one protein getting the right arrangement by chance, there's 20 amino acids. The average protein's 400 amino acids long. The point is, a protein's odds of happening by chance, and that's just the arrangement, not even the shape, is 10 to the 520th power. In statistics, if something is 10 to the 50th, it's considered statistically impossible. Well, the odds are winning. You could win the California Super Lottery 500 times in a row before you would reach the odds of one protein happening by chance. So if a protein can't happen by chance, an eye can't and a human can't. So statistics overwhelmingly says it's a result of design, because it's the inverse. If the chance odds are 10 to the 520th to the negative power, that it happened by design is to the positive power, the inverse of that. So I think that's winning the lottery. I know when to be humble. I've read the string theory, and I don't know enough to comment on it. I don't claim to know everything.
You're not a physicist, of course, and of course string theory changing the fundamentals of physics, and I will accept the fact that you can't comment on something that you're not well versed on, and I appreciate that. Wild Card Line, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi, George. Hi, Bill. My name is Jeff. I'm calling from North Carolina. I'm one of your atheist callers, and I too am an engineer. And I'm an aerospace engineer.
Okay, Jeff.
So it's good to hear a fellow engineer on the air, although I disagree with just about everything Bill said, but disagree collegially. Here's my question for you, Bill. I always ask this of creationists, and usually the answer I get is I have no idea. So I'll put you on the line, put you on point. If the designer is a marvelous and wonderful designer, then how come 99% of all animals have gone extinct? 99% of the animals existing today, 99% of them never get to reproductive age. 99% of the solar system is inhospitable to life. 99% of DNA is junk DNA. And I can go on. The universe is made of death, decay, and destruction from the second law of thermodynamics. 99% of the Earth's history was inhospitable to multicellular life.
Okay, is that it?
I could go on, but that should be enough to start the conversation.
That'll be the rest of the night, so go ahead.
Well, first, I disagree with a lot of his 99%, because I have read up on the extinction 99%. And I've seen articles, a lot of evolutionists that say that's grossly assumed and exaggerated, that they're assuming animals existed that went extinct, that they don't have a shred of evidence that they did exist. The fossil record has phyla of many, many things that live today in the Cambrian layer. So I would politely dispute the 99%. I think that some people throw it out there to shock people. I don't believe that's an accurate number. 99% of animals don't reach reproductive age. Well, bacteria reproduces within 20 minutes. That's the most common thing on this planet, and I don't think they die after 19 minutes. So I would challenge that statistic. Now, one I'll definitely challenge is the junk DNA, because I have done a lot of reading on that. People regardless of their worldview of creation evolution, are starting to see that there is not all the junk DNA that they think there is. For example, that you are, this is my belief, you are hardware, the nuts and bolts of the DNA, and you are software. That's the information, and that's the key part. For example, a symphony, if you want to hear the Philharmonic, they have hardware, but what makes them good or bad is the software. When do they play? When do they turn off? How long do they turn off? And people are learning that that's what they used to call junk DNA. Little history, people used to say if a segment of DNA does not make a protein, it's junk. They said it's a leftover from our past. Today in biochemistry, they're learning the junk DNA is synthesizing when the proteins should be made, when they should be turned on, when they should be turned off, and that it's not junk at all. And again, don't believe a word I say, but look it up. But more and more people are learning that DNA does not have segments of junk in it. Death and decay, we're stuck in the second law of thermodynamics. If I was God, I would do it differently. My daughter had leukemia. She did okay. She pulled through. I saw 12 precious babies die. Although I'm a creationist, I was mad at God emotionally. But I learned about red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, bone marrow, and I just said, wow, man, you are the creator. But right now I feel upset about all this death that I'm seeing of little babies. And I can't fathom babies dying, but we are stuck in a creation that's cursed with death and decay. But during the suffering, a lot of people choose to walk away from God, and there's a lot of suffering to do that. But if they looked at creation, it would be easier. Because when we suffer, there's two choices. Humility, that I don't understand this, but I accept it, or bitterness. We'd all like God to sit down next to us and say, okay, this is what's going on here. Oh, okay, it doesn't happen. But it's easy to be humble when you understand you've got 60,000 miles of blood vessels, 75 trillion cells. Each cell does 100,000 reactions per second. And just say, hey, you're in charge. Help me get through it.
Bill, is there anything that could get you swayed to believe in the theory of evolution?
I would like to see living evidence. I would like to see fossil evidence. I'd like to see some genetic mechanisms besides mutation, because mutation falls woefully short of it. I would like to see empirical evidence, not just hypothesis, brought to the conclusion again. We have to base our conclusion on our observation. And, you know, I would accept it if it were true. I'd sleep in on Sunday morning and do other things with my life. But it's not a religious debate. It's a truth debate. And if creation is true, it's worth looking into.
Bill, I want to thank you for really making this a lively evening. Bill started first hour tonight, floating format. So when we come back, we will have pure open lines tonight. Just let you sound off. And don't forget, live program on the 4th of July. As a matter of fact, let's make it official. Happy birthday, America. I'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.